Good morning. It's Marcus Cauty from Sander Training, here with you with the Institute of Sales Management. And today's webinar is how to turn an A player into a B player in under 4 weeks. Terrible managers usually do what was done to them. If you recall what happened to you when you got your first sales job, you were probably dumped in for a couple of days of product training, and then you were given a phone, a computer, and told, congratulations, you are one. That is not an onboarding process. What that is management by abdication. Terrible managers are probably unclear about what was expected, and their manager, who hired them originally, may have told them, sink or swim. It's all right, you'll pick it up on the job. Well, frankly, that's done. If you're hiring an A player, this is somebody who is going to outperform the next best salesperson by a factor of somewhere between 5 and 12. You want to make sure that you set them up to succeed. You probably just spent the price of a small mortgage to hire them in terms of recruitment costs, recruitment fees, advertising fees, interview time, the time that you spent putting the offer and the legal T's and C's together, dealing with HR, dealing with dozens of candidates, hopefully. And you've just brought this person on board, and now what you're going to do is you're just going to say, they're a big boy, let them get on with it? Well, I think that's a big mistake. Great managers understand that they have two functions in life. Hire the best and get the best out of them. Getting the best out of them requires that you as the manager are not somebody who just leaves them to it. Getting the best out of them means that you have a job, which is to coach, to train, to develop, to clear the path so they can do their job. And when they're brand new to the role, to onboard them properly. Great managers never, ever, 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 ever shortcut the onboarding process. The onboarding process requires you to make sure that in the first 120 days, they know what's expected of them, by when, where they can find the information. It makes sure that the A player is introduced to all the right people within the organization, the company historian, the company doer, the person who gets stuff done, that they need to be introduced as the manager's man or woman and saying, Marcus is my man, you need to look after him, he is important to our business, I expect you to give him what he needs and to help him. That this person, this A player, is introduced to senior management, they're introduced and handed over to the existing accounts if they're taking on existing accounts. And there's a proper onboarding process. The onboarding process is, in the early stage, at least 50% learning and 50% doing. And the doing becomes more and more over the first 120 days. Now, why 120 days? In the first 120 days, a new hire is deciding, is this the job I was sold? Is my manager a stand-up guy? Do I like the people that I'm working with? Is the product, the service that we're offering, any cop? If it's not the job that they were sold, they're probably getting their feelers out to jump ship. If they are deciding on you as the manager, are you somebody that they trust, they like, they want to serve and work for? Then you've got a problem. And it's because you haven't done your job right in the recruitment selection process, in the notice period, or in the onboarding process. And I'll cover that in a bit more detail in a minute. But the most important thing is, who do you put them with in that first 120 days? Do you put them with Tim Nice but Dim, who's got plenty of time on his hands, spends a lot of time whining, moaning, bitching, groaning, grumbling, complaining, judging, making excuses? Or do you put them with Charlie the closer, who basically goes out and is completely busy, focused, full pipeline, strong relationships with prospects and clients, always moving deals forward? Who do you want your A player to spend their time with? Great managers start by setting up new hires for success in the hiring and selection process. This is where they take the time to set expectations about what's expected of that salesperson, the kind of behaviors and habits, the metrics that matter, focusing them on the leading indicators, getting the salesperson to co-develop a behavioural plan for the first 120 days that will form a template for every 90 days thereafter. The first month is finding their feet, and then the next 90 days is absolutely getting out there and hustling, filling the pipeline up, disqualifying out the non-opportunities that they've inherited, making sure they're going out and meeting lapsed customers. Lapsed customers are a fantastic opportunity, and making sure that in the hiring and selection process, they know that that is expected of them, so they can build that plan. Making sure they get to understand enough about the product to be able to ask better questions, so when they start, they can hit the ground running. And great managers make sure that during the notice period, that process of expectation setting and planning and introductions is continued, making sure that they're feeding them the kind of information that will help them to sell more. I don't care how much product knowledge you can spout, because frankly, that's not important. What is important is your ability to be able to provide useful information that the prospect or that your prospects are likely to value. If you can't do that, then frankly, what are you doing in the sales role? Now, another challenge here is making sure that during the notice period, there are no backouts or cancellations. There's no reason for them to want to change their mind. They want to make sure that the salesperson is comfortable and is happy with everything, that there are no changes in their expectations, that there are no hitches, there are no other counter offers going on, and a great manager will make sure that they're making the introductions. Maybe if there's some jolly, they're inviting them along and they're bringing them into the fold. Great managers make sure that new hires spend time with other A players. An A player will have an affinity with other A players. They will become despondent if they're dealing with B and C players. They'll leave, or worse, they may stay and become a B or even a C player. That is a catastrophe. And frankly, that should be an act of gross misconduct, because it is an absolute act of negligence. Great managers communicate clearly, precisely what is expected. Ambiguity is the mother of all faux-pas. If you expect someone to do something and you aren't explicit about what you expect, and then they don't do it, and you fire them for it, or you berate them for it, it's your fault. If things aren't working in your team, look in the mirror. If you haven't been explicit about what is expected in terms of prospecting behavior and how you're going to measure and track that, how you're going to hold the salesperson to account, then frankly, your fault. If you weren't absolutely clear about what was expected in terms of completing important admin, like, for example, updating the CRM with meaningful content, not was interested or call back in 6 months. Making sure that the new hire is absolutely clear about the selling methodology and system that is in place. Making sure that the new hire understands their responsibility to the company, to the rest of the team. Understanding that there are very specific questions that they need to be able to answer in terms of their pipeline. What's new in your pipeline this week? What have you advanced in your pipeline this week? What agreed, contracted for next step if you've advanced it? What has not advanced in your pipeline this week? If not, why not? What are you going to do to advance or disqualify this week? By when? Why don't you know? What don't you know? And if so, why don't you know? What have you disqualified this week? Why? What have you won or closed this week? How much revenue or profit have you generated? What are the agreed next steps? Have you done a handover to the operations or execution team? Have you asked for referrals? What happened? What have you lost this week? Why did we lose? If it was money, why didn't you disqualify it sooner? What will you do next time to ensure that we're not too expensive and that we learn that fast and waste no time? Where did they end up going? What's the value of a qualified opportunity moving through your pipeline today? Do you have 300 to 500% of your quota for this period in your pipeline moving from qualified to closable? How are you going to build it up to that level? By when? What actions or resources do you need me as your manager to take to help you achieve that level of pipeline? What lessons did you learn? What have you changed in your pre-called plan template? Are there any roadblocks I can help you overcome or clear? In that process of communicating those questions and making sure the salesperson has a written version of whatever their equivalent of the pipeline review report would look like, also make sure that they understand that they're expected to develop and improve, that they will capture lessons, that they will study, and they will get to understand the proposition and how you use that proposition to ask better questions and to sell better. I just skipped in it. Right. Okay. So great managers communicate what must have, nice to have, and red flags look like. So there are no surprises. Don't try and trick or trip up your salespeople, particularly A players, but make it clear what they must do within the first week, the first month, the first 3 months, first 4 months. And in a moment, I'll talk to you about that onboarding plan. Also, make sure that you tell them what's unacceptable. So if by the end of day 1, for example, they haven't learnt their 30-second commercial, that is a big red flag. By morning of day 2, if they haven't learnt it, then I would probably be looking to replace them. You probably haven't hired an A player. And A players, they have humility. They understand that they aren't the finished article. Good B players sometimes think that their ego is bigger than their capability. But great managers know you work harder for your reasons than their reasons. So they will, in the interview process, understand what it is that makes you do what you do. Okay? They will understand your personal motivation. They will take the time and the energy and the effort to listen and to understand and to work out how they can tie your personal goals to your corporate goals. They'll understand who you're doing it for. A question I love to ask and always get, or so often get disappointingly vague answers is, well, why do you sell? Most people kind of drifted into selling, and they sell to live rather than live to sell. A players, in my experience, live to sell. They love it. They can't wait. They get up early because they can't wait to get into work. They are hungry. The next sale, the next sale, the next sale, it drives them. But they're also doing it for any number of different reasons. The number of times I have sold on the back of school fees, a couple of times I've sold on the back of people wanting IVF treatment that they couldn't afford. And so they paid me so I could train them so they could afford 3, 4, 5 rounds of IVF. Now, their motivation as a salesperson, as an A player, is absolutely at the heart. And a great manager will uncover the individual salesperson's personal motivation. Great managers understand your reason why. Why are you doing it? Why are you coming to work? Why do you get up? Why do you put up with the stuff that you have to in order to be successful in sales? Great managers know precisely what's expected of you every day, and they will talk you through it. So, for example, in our world, I'd want them to go through a process of understanding why we have a system, to read a specific book, such as You Can't Teach a Kid to Ride a Bike at a Seminar by David Sandler, or The Contrarian Salesman by Jody Williamson, or if they're in the channel, Making Channel Sales Work by myself and David Davies. Okay, I'd be able to identify the key benefits to having a selling system and identify 7 big pain points of not having one. Being able to talk through the buyer-seller dance, identify what a positive outcome from a sales meeting would look like, being able to explain Wimp junction and pendulum theory. Now, these terms probably mean nothing to you, but in your world, you probably have the same kind of things. They would need, for example, by the end of day 1, to have learnt their 30-second commercial. By the end of day 2, they would need to be able to deliver a zero-objection, no-pressure cold call in a reasonable manner. By day 3, I would expect them to be relatively fluent in it. By day 4, I would be expecting them to make at least 2 unique effective conversations a day. By day 5, I'd be looking for 3 unique effective conversations a day. And the unique effective is they get past the gatekeeper, through to the decision maker, they deliver an upfront contract that says, I'm going to tell you in 30 seconds the reason for my call, and then you can either hang up or invite me in. Does that sound fair? Now, in doing that and mapping that out, it's not spoon-feeding. What it's doing is making sure you are setting them up to succeed. So week 1, some basics. Week 2, developing a set of skills and making sure that they're familiar with the different products and services that you have to offer. Making sure that they've developed the questions that they need in order to sell those products and services instead of just becoming a feature benefit merchant. Great managers understand that they have to communicate what you need to know, by when you need to know it, and where you can find that information. Is it available on the company intranet? Do you need to speak to a specific person? Is it available in the CRM notes? Whatever it happens to be, the manager will make sure that the new A player is clearly communicated to, has their expectations clearly set, and there are no surprises, good or bad. We don't like surprises in sales. What we want is predictable, boringly predictable, exponential, highly profitable growth. Great managers focus your attention on what you can control, on what you can control, not on what they'd like you to deliver, like, for example, revenue and profit, because that's out of your control. But what you can control are your behaviors, and you can then control your behaviors through discipline by turning them into habit, and habits set you free. Behavior is the key. If you're focusing your attention on trying to get somebody to have their attitude right, and then hoping their behavior will catch up, you will be waiting for a very, very cold day in hell. Do the behavior, and the attitude will catch up eventually. Do the behavior, do the behavior, do the behavior. So what does behavior look like? Well, one key behavior is a prospecting behavior. Every day, focusing on getting 5 to 7 unique, effective conversations going every day. Don't care whether it takes you 5 dials or it takes you 100. You keep going until that target is hit. A learning habit. Developing the habit of capturing 3 lessons per day as an absolute minimum. A journaling habit. The lessons that you learn today will pay you dividends tomorrow. But again, most salespeople have the curse of history on them, which is they don't learn from it, so they're doomed to repeat it. And if they're doomed to repeat the same mistakes, the company is going to continue to incur cost after cost after cost without any improvement. Frankly, that is plain old stupid. Now, they also focus your attention on rehearsal, pre-call planning, post-call debrief. And I'll cover that again in a little bit more detail in a moment. So great managers help you to create the conditions for you to make money. You didn't get into sales for being loved, and if you did, get out. It's no place to get your emotional needs met. Great managers make sure that you have the tools and resources, the training, the coaching, make sure that they clear the path. They protect you from the idiocy of your own management, senior management teams. In the channel, a great channel manager understands that their job is to make sure that in the first 90 days, the coin-operated salespeople of the reseller are making money. Because if they don't, that reseller will go dark on them. It'll go silent, and all the time, money, effort, resource that went into recruiting them will be wasted. So our challenge here, whether you're in direct sales or indirect sales, is to make sure that you as the manager are making the conditions right for the people who sell on your behalf in your team to make money. Do they have the right resources? Have you made sure that their equipment is functional? Are you making sure that the people within the team are doing a proper handover, for example? I work in the hospitality area a lot, and one big area, a sticking point that comes up time and again, is the handover between sales and operations. Now again, are you making sure that that handover is clean, that it's effective, so that you don't bring money in through the front door only to let it leak out of the back? And great managers will co-develop your personal behavioural recipe book. Your recipe book is made up of the behaviours that are going to help you achieve your targets and your personal goals. You make sure that you're doing the right behaviours every day. So, for example, when a salesperson has a quota of 1.2 million, they need £100,000 per month on average. If the average order value is £20,000, that means at least £20,000 to £25,000 needs to be brought in per week. In order to do that, we have to look at the conversion rates. And they may be notional to begin with, but if we're talking about for every proposal at final decision stage that goes out, you currently have a 1 in 3 close rate, which frankly is terrible. Then if you have a 1 in 3 close rate, then you need at least 3 of those in order to get 1. Now, if you need 5 of those to get them over the course of a year, that means you need 15 as an absolute minimum. Now, realistically, I'd want 300 to 500% in my pipeline, so I have more contingency built in. And so over 7 to 12 months, that would be one of my objectives. I would also look at the conversion rate between final meeting and proposal to first meeting, from first meeting to unique effectives to dials. I would also look at things like referral marketing, so referral partnerships, and asking for referrals on every call. I would also make sure that as part of the cookbook, there are regular review meetings, we call them recon meetings, and quarterly value reviews with your clients. So I'd want all this stuff built in. I'd also want a daily behavioural target of asking for a minimum of 3 or 4 referrals. Now, in order to help the salesperson plan and prioritise, the cookbook is essential because it'll keep them honest and you can keep their feet to the fire. Remember, motivation is an internal force. I cannot motivate anyone to do anything ever. I can bribe, lie, bully, cajole, inspire, but I cannot motivate. Motivation is internal, and anyone who claims to be a motivational speaker isn't. They may be an inspirational speaker, but motivational they are not. So, great managers will actively support you to plan and prioritize. In the interview and selection process, they will talk to you about your career path and your plan. Now, great managers will protect you from the idiocy of internal politics and your CFO pulling the commissions of your resellers and your partners. They will stop you from being bothered about dealing with pointless paperwork and reporting that's designed by audit for audit purposes. They will make sure that you have tools that are designed by salespeople for salespeople to help you sell. We have a program called Sandler Enterprise Selling where we have 16 tools and growing that most of them are no more than 1 or 2 pages. Very few of them take any longer than 20 minutes to complete, and they're practical working documents. And you need to, as the manager, help your salespeople to do their job as best and as simply as they can and focus on the real issue, which is going to the bank. Not playing petty politics, not playing with fiefdoms and empire building. Concentrate your energy on helping get the best out of your people. Now, great managers do not punish failure. They understand that you have to fail fast, fail early, and fail often. As part of the learning curve, they will encourage you to go out and make mistakes and come back with the lessons of failure. One of my favorite exercises with management is where managers are run ragged because they've tended to be rescuing managers. And it's to teach the manager this simple phrase, this simple sentence, when someone comes to them for help. Adam, this sounds important and it looks like it needs my undivided attention. Unfortunately, I can't give that to you now. Looking at my watch, I can help you in 3.5 hours. So why don't you come back at 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and I can give you 15 to 20 minutes of my undivided attention then. Between now and then, what I'd like you to do is go away and on no more than one side of A4 to write down what the problem is, the 3 things that you have done yourself to fix it, and if you haven't fixed it, then come back to me with the 3 lessons from your failure to fix it, and the 1 question you want me to help you to resolve. Interestingly enough, very few people come back. But what we want them to do is go out and fail. We want them to come back with the lessons of failure. We want them to learn from their failure, because in my experience, I have learned virtually nothing from my great victories. I have learned enormous amounts from my great beatings and drubbings. So again, I don't want to punish failure, because the moment I tell people it's okay to fail and then I punish them, they'll never trust me or believe me again, and they will never take risks. They won't be creative. I will have created learned helplessness, and I will become a bottleneck. And then I will suffer from upward delegation. I'll be run ragged. People won't take risks for fear of being punished or singled out. And what I will then create is drama. Great managers encourage your rehearsal habit. Perfect practice makes perfect. Practice doesn't. Me going out on the golf course and just repeating my terrible drive or my awful chip shots isn't going to improve. I need to think about the shot. I need to get my head in the right space. I need to sit into my shot. I need to keep my head still. I need to lead with my left hand. I need to make sure I'm visualizing the ball going where I want it to go. I need to swing smoothly without forcing it with the right hand. And if I do that setup every single time, miraculously my game improves. But if I just go out and hack, I get a disastrous shot. I have balls that are magnetically attracted to water long grass and woods. Now, your manager will make sure that you understand that you must go to every meeting with a written pre-call plan. For every hour you're in front of the prospect, you're going to put in at least 1 to 3 hours of rehearsal. Now, I know that sounds like an astronomically high amount, but it's not. When you consider how many dials and how many leads you burnt through, and then how many unique effectives, and how many first meetings, and how much mileage you put on, and how much of your pre-sales and product subject matter experts' time, and how much internal time you wasted just getting up to the first meeting in your forecasting and sales meetings, then second meetings, third meetings, fourth meetings, fifth meetings, then putting the proposal together, doing the demo, all of that, it's worth every second of actual rehearsal. And if you're going to practice, do deliberate practice. Act as if it's the real thing. And the manager will play the part of the prospect. They'll play the part of the seller. They'll play the part of the observer. And each time they'll swap these roles. They will play positive, negative, and neutral prospects. They will play dominant, and they will play cautious, and they will play distracted, and they will play very quiet and teamy kind of prospects, so that no matter what comes at you, you've lived it beforehand. There are no surprises. And the problem is that if you don't do rehearsal, then what tends to happen is your amygdala, which triggers freeze, flight, or fight, is likely to get triggered when you need it to do so least. And if you freeze, if you flee, or if you fight, you will lose your customer or your prospect. So great managers encourage real rehearsal as if it's the real thing, and they'll go over it and over it and over it. That, great managers, is your job. Great managers will also have you debrief immediately, so it's still fresh in your mind, and to do so both in conversation and in writing. Now, there's a good reason for debriefing immediately in writing, because you're going to use that debrief in order to prepare your pre-call plan for the next step. And you want it fresh. You want to have identified, are there any gaps in your knowledge? Are there any questions you didn't get an answer to? Are there any new developments or new insights that you did find out about that you need to address? And in getting people into doing the habit of immediate debrief, what you're going to do is increase your close rate. You'll shorten your sales cycles. You will improve the conversion, and by shortening the sales cycle, you will have more time for prospecting, but also for leisure. Great managers establish personal accountability. You can't really hold someone else to account. They have to account for themselves. You can supervise, but my view is supervisory is about 3 to 5% of any typical manager's role in a sales environment. Now, I get it if you're dealing with nuclear waste, or you're dealing with dangerous machinery and you're the supervisor there. But trusting people to get on with the job is a very important part of being a manager. And getting people to take ownership and personal responsibility and to be accountable for themselves is key. If you don't, what you will again do is become a bottleneck, because people won't do stuff, or they'll wait for your approval, and that is a disaster waiting to happen. Great managers know that you deserve what you tolerate. As a manager, if you tolerate excuses, you deserve it. If you tolerate non-performance without confronting it, you deserve it. If you tolerate discounting, you deserve it. So, great managers set clear boundaries as well as expectations. They tell people what is not acceptable. And they make sure that they're ready to confront that issue with constructive conflict. Constructive conflict means that you can disagree, but you focus on the issue. You focus on the behavior. You focus on the result. You never make it personal. Great managers help you to understand compound interest. Albert Einstein said, people who understand compound interest earn it, people who don't pay it. If you take £100 and you put 0.5% interest on that every day for 270 days, you will get something like £373 back if you just reinvest 100% and you do it over 270 working days. That's a 3.7 times increase in performance, in results, in profitability, in revenue, in market share. So what they understand is the 0.5% rule. Every day, managers will ask of their salespeople, what have you done to improve by 0.5% or more today? And in the interview and selection process, they make it clear that the 0.5% rule is essential for this person not only to be hired, but to be able to remain. Greater managers also understand that teams learn by learning from one another and by capturing those lessons in some form of central repository, a database, an intranet, having the sales support function capture those lessons, and to have the right to confront anybody about not having their 3 lessons a day. If you think about it, a team of 5, that's 15 lessons a day captured by the business. That's 75 lessons a week. Now, over the course of a year, that's about 3,500 lessons. When was the last time you or your business improved 3.5 times, let alone 35, 350, or 3,500? Yes, it's a lot. But then that goes into the onboarding manual for new hires. Because if you capture all those lessons, you index them, then in the first 90 to 120 days, the first port of call, whenever they have any questions about the product, the service, the proposition, the marketplace, selling, the selling methodology, they will all be in that onboarding manual, in the lesson capture sheet. And they need to be indexed so people can find them quickly. Teams that work together tend to do much better than teams that compete against each other. Yes, you'll get the odd superstar, but what we want is the whole team and the entire business to grow. Great managers never, ever move the goalpost. If your target was 5 unique, effective conversations today and you only got 4, you have to make up the missing one today. If you keep moving the goalpost and downgrading the target, then whatever the target is at the beginning of the year, they won't believe in it, and half the battle is already lost. Because if they don't believe in that target, then they will do whatever they can in order to prove that it's impossible. So don't move the goalpost, modify the behavior. Now, great managers also understand that you play best your strengths. Your strengths are your development areas. You can put me in a room, train me up on Excel for 2 weeks. I can guarantee at the end of 2 weeks, I will still be terrible at it. And the only thing I'll look forward to is never doing it again. Your strengths are your main development areas. Yes, you may have to work on some of those areas of weakness, but, excuse me, if you play to your strengths and you do more of what you already do well, chances are you'll end up having a lot more success. Great managers make training, coaching, mentoring a regular occurrence, which is diarized right from day one, and they keep those appointments with their people as if they are the most important meetings they have with real customers, because they are your customers. Great managers understand that no one is the finished article, that they all need help. And, the old cliche is, the sports people like Tiger Woods and Nadal, they all have coaches. Why? Because coaches help you get the best out of yourself, to be more of what you already are, and to enhance, refine, get slight edge. difference between the number 5 tennis player and the number 1 tennis player is probably not massive. And a great example of this is Jesse Owen, who won the 1938 100 meters in Berlin. Everyone remembers him, but who was the number 2? Now, I only read his name a couple of weeks ago, and I can't remember it. And the difference between him and Jesse Owens was about 0.04 of a second. And this guy actually broke 4 world records. 4. And no one even knows his name. But the difference is coaching, it's training, it's the amount of time you put in the foundations. And you need to think of yourself as a soldier doing drill, practice. The manager is the drill sergeant. The drill sergeant isn't always popular or even liked, but he keeps the troops alive by preparing them through constant repetition and drill until they get it perfect, and then making sure that under live fire they don't bottle out, making sure that they're taking their history and allowing the salesperson to see it as their future, making sure that they're helping their salespeople through daily coaching calls, weekly coaching calls, monthly coaching calls, team training, team coaching, buddying systems. And great managers foster a genuine learning culture. If you want your A player to become an A-plus player, make sure they never stop learning. Make sure they have those resources around them. Make sure that they're participating. And if you've hired an A player who doesn't play nicely with the learning culture, I suggest you may have hired the wrong A player. Now, it may be okay for you to leave them if they're remote, but if there's a them and us mentality within the office, I don't think that fosters a healthy environment, and it will have an impact on morale. And people will say, well, Johnny doesn't have to do it, why do I? Now, great managers do not fear hiring people who are better than themselves. They actively court redundancy by developing people in their team to take over from them so that they can move on to their next big role. Great managers hire people who are different, whose strengths make their weaknesses irrelevant, and whose strengths make the weaknesses of the team irrelevant. Great managers are not afraid to be challenged. Great managers encourage challenge. They encourage constructive conflict. They encourage people to disagree and to come up with creative ideas, even if they fail. And in doing that, they do make themselves redundant. Now, Sandler builds sales teams of a world-class quality. In fact, the research from one of the big research companies suggested that at least 50% more of the salespeople who are trained by Sandler hit or exceed quota. Now, I put a link to a couple of books that you can get on the announcements section, and you're very welcome to connect with me via LinkedIn. You're very welcome to get me. So, Sandler Sales Management Trainer is my tag on LinkedIn. I'm on The Inquisitor on Twitter. You can email me at marcus.cauchi@sandler.com or phone me. Mobile is best, 07515 937 221. And I'm also a mentor with the Institute of Sales Management. So if you have questions, go on, join the Institute of Sales Management if you haven't already. If you have already joined, then you can go on to the your section, your information page, and you can then click on mentoring, and I or one of the dozen or so other mentors will answer your questions. If you want me specifically, name me in person. Now, what else? Okay. I've got great news also. My book that I wrote with David Davies is now available on Kindle. It's also available in paperback in the US on Amazon. And in the announcements, there's a link to the Kindle link for the UK. If you would like to get a free chapter, then there are instructions in there. What I'd also like to talk to you about very briefly is 13 blind spots to corporate excellence that we cover through the excellence book that's been developed by Dave Matson. And there are 13 of these. No process for hiring winners, improperly onboarding salespeople, failing to tie the corporate goals to the personal goals, not creating a culture of accountability, no common sales language, not focusing on lead generation, filling the top of the funnel, not capturing best practices, no common sales language, not focusing on lead generation, for some reason that's repeated, not building the bench, not knowing how to coach, not sharing the vision with those who have to implement, fostering a culture of learned helplessness, limited shared methodologies and systems. So these blind spots are what I've been discussing today. If you have questions, please fire them at me now in the questions from the audience section. Otherwise, we'll be wrapping up in 2 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to recommend a few books while I'm waiting for these questions. The first one is The Sandler Success Principles by Dave Matson and Bruce Seidman. And there's another book called The Sandler Rules. There's The Road to Excellence by Dave Matson and Winning from Failing by Josh Seibert. These are all great books that every manager should really try and get their hands on. And if you haven't already signed up to the ISM, there's a load of content up on their learning portal. And if you would like to, then please email me at marcus.cauchi@sandler.com, and I will happily arrange for you to crash a Sandler management class that's in your area. Now, we're in about 28, 30 countries now. There are about 500 trainers, about 300 plus training centers. So there's a very good possibility that you could be in a class next week or certainly this month learning some really useful stuff at no cost. Okay? So I'm going to wrap up now. If you do have any questions for me, you've got my telephone number, you've got my email, and so I'll just leave you with that at the last section. There you go. Please do get back in touch. Look forward to hearing from you. Bye-bye.